When I started watching F1 after following NASCAR for years, I didn't realize how many small differences there were. I'm skipping straight past the obvious stuff in this video and giving you only the things that you'll notice after watching both series. Here's 50 differences between NASCAR and F1. In interviews, NASCAR drivers are far more optimistic, or delusional depending on how you look at it, than F1 drivers. Even guys who drive midfield cars in NASCAR will boldly proclaim their confidence that they can win the championship. Meanwhile in F1, you'll often see quotes from top drivers explaining how they feel like their season is over and they can't understand the car, even only a handful of races into the year. NASCAR has an entry list for races, a set of cars that will attempt to qualify for the race with up to 40 maximum slots, meaning DNQs are possible. F1 has the same 20 cars locked into each race regardless of qualifying results. Teams are locked into NASCAR by their charter system. Buying a charter guarantees more payment and it locks you into races even if you qualify poorly. F1 uses an application process to select their teams. There are 10 F1 teams, soon to be 11, that each field 2 cars. Running 2 cars is the requirement. In NASCAR, the number of cars is totally up to the team, maxing out at 4. Bigger teams tend to be better, but there have been some good one-car teams. F1 drivers need to have a super license before they can race. They need to accumulate enough points for this in other series like F2 or IndyCar. NASCAR has no such rule. A random guy from New Zealand can come in and start a race in the middle of the season. Since 2022, NASCAR provides the teams all their parts, whereas F1 only provides a rule set, or formula, for a car. This means that while NASCAR bodies are all the same between manufacturers, F1 cars have totally different bodies, wings, side pods, and floors if you look at them up close. Unique cars add an interesting element of engineering to follow, but result in less parity. A few differences in the way things are described. F1 fans call the drivers collectively the grid. NASCAR fans typically say the garage or the field. For example, in F1 you might say he's the best driver on the grid, while in NASCAR it's he's the best driver in the field. F1 cars can be called by their team name. For example, Max Verstappen is driving the Red Bull. NASCAR doesn't do that. Instead, they'll call cars by their number, something like Kyle Larson is driving the 5. NASCAR downsized to 1 practice session per weekend after COVID. F1 still has 3 practices per weekend, except on sprint race weekends. Speaking of sprint race weekends, F1 has points-paying mini races called sprints. The closest thing to this that exists in NASCAR are qualifying races like the Daytona Duels and heats at short tracks. Qualifying in F1 is a 3-round group format. The first 2 rounds eliminate the bottom 5 each, then the final round decides the pole. NASCAR uses a single car qualifying format where each driver gets 1 or 2 laps and whoever is fastest gets pole straight away. The exception for this is at road courses where NASCAR uses a group format but has no eliminations. I think both series have the best qualifying format for what they need. Groups are more exciting, but can get a little too chaotic at ovals. Qualifying is far more important in F1 than NASCAR. It was surprising to me when I learned how difficult it is to win if an F1 driver starts even from 5th on back. No one's ever won starting from last place, which in NASCAR is almost common given that the races are longer, pre-race penalties move contenders to the back, and it's much easier to make passes. Speaking of long races, F1 has a constant length of 305 kilometers, which works out to be about 1.5 to 2 hours. NASCAR races have variable lengths from 165 miles at Chicago to 600 miles at Charlotte, but each race is typically 3 to 4 hours long. It makes sense that F1 is shorter given how much more G-forces their drivers have to endure in the car, and there's no refueling allowed. If you get a pre-race penalty from swapping out parts, in F1 this might come in the form of a 5-place or 10-place grid penalty, where you start that many spots behind where you qualified. In NASCAR, all pre-race penalties require drivers to start at the back. NASCAR has the most diverse set of track types of any motorsport series in the world. In the last 5 years, the series has run on short tracks, intermediate ovals, superspeedways, F1 circuits, narrow road courses, big tracks like Indianapolis, dirt tracks, and street courses. F1 is mostly traditional circuits, with a handful of iconic street circuits thrown in there, although some of the street circuits are so purpose-built that they just basically appear like a normal track. There's still a good amount of variation though. An off-track in F1 might put you in the gravel, the wall, the grass, the tire barrier, or leave you completely unscathed. Not to mention these tracks are across every corner of the globe. If there's something that delays the start like weather, F1 will subtract any pace laps from the length of the race. This is because teams precisely fuel up their cars to an exact amount, and making them run more laps might cause them to run out of fuel. NASCAR allows refueling so they don't care. They'll have cars pace 15 laps before a race and line up 4 wide to salute the fans if they want. Now we can get on to some of the in-race differences. The start procedure in F1 is a standing start, barring poor weather. All the drivers line up staggered on the grid and go when the lights turn off. NASCAR exclusively uses rolling starts. A good start is critical in F1. The first lap can and often does decide who wins a race because of how difficult it can be to pass. In NASCAR, the first lap is almost irrelevant in the grand scheme of the race. If you're faster, you can make passes at some point, so the drivers just try to keep their car in one piece. If there's some kind of hazard on the track, F1 has 5 levels of precautionary measure to employ. First is a yellow flag, indicating not to pass, likely because there's something off track. Second is a double yellow flag, which tells drivers to prepare to stop. Third is a virtual safety car, which forces drivers to slow down to 70% speed. Fourth is a full safety car, which bunches up and slows down the pack. And fifth is a red flag, which stops the race. NASCAR is more simple. A caution bunches everyone up behind the pace car and slows them down, and a red flag stops the race. At road courses, they do utilize local blue flags, which are basically F1's single yellow flag, but they don't follow the F1 system at ovals because speeds are too high, plus drivers can usually see what's happening ahead. Drivers in NASCAR can also hear what's happening ahead because they have a spotter who tells them where they are in relation to other cars, if crashes are happening, and where other drivers are running well. F1 drivers don't have spotters. They have to rely on 2 flimsy wing mirrors and the data their race engineer gives them. In an F1 restart, everyone lines up single file and the safety car speeds away. The leader can then slow down and go whenever he wants. No one is allowed to pass until crossing the start-finish line. In NASCAR, everyone chooses between inside or outside, then the leader has to pick a spot to hit the throttle in the restart zone, which is marked before the start-finish line. Second place is even allowed to pass him if he gets a better jump. When pit stops come around, there's tons of little differences. First off, F1 has 3 different types of tire, soft, medium, and hard, which have a trade-off between speed and longevity. NASCAR recently has been using 2 tires on occasion, a hard prime tire and a soft option tire, but they've moved away from it for the time being. F1 requires teams to make a pit stop in a dry race. They mandate that each car runs at least 2 of the tire compounds. This is to promote a more interesting race, especially at tracks with low degradation where a pit stop isn't necessary. NASCAR teams need pit stops to fill up on fuel, usually at the very least 3 times per race, so there's technically no requirement. F1 pit crews have no limit on the number of members. That's why their pit stops are around 2 to 3 seconds. NASCAR only allows 5 men over the wall in their pit stops, and a fast time for these crews is around 9 seconds. While F1 pit crews are made up of engineers, NASCAR pit crews are made up of athletes. These guys are hand-picked from top colleges and sports to try to maximize time saved on pit road. F1 cars have a pit road speed limiter that drivers can turn on to avoid speeding. In NASCAR there isn't one, and there's also no speedometer, so drivers need to use engine RPMs to estimate their speed. This leads to a lot of speeding penalties. Speaking of penalties, they're enforced in vastly different ways. F1 uses time penalties. They'll add 5 or 10 seconds to your time if they found you were speeding or you caused a collision. This is served at the next pit stop, or if you don't pit again, at the end of the race. If you have a penalty and don't finish, it carries over into the next race. In grave circumstances, they'll issue a pass-through penalty where you have to drive through the pit lane. In NASCAR, there's no gray area here. All penalties under green flag conditions are drive-throughs, and all under yellow are end of the longest line, meaning you have to go to the back. In rare occasions, like with a wheel coming off, or a blatant intentional and dangerous wreck, NASCAR will park drivers either for a few laps or for the rest of the race. F1 is far more involved with the on-track affairs. The stewards who review penalties are tasked with deciding if there's a penalty and how harsh it should be. Almost any time there's an on-track scuffle that results in contact or someone going off the track, the commentators will instantly discuss what the stewards will think of it. This strict governing did seem overbearing to me at first, considering NASCAR practices a boys have at it policy, but it makes sense in F1 where the racing is more dangerous. Once you manage to get off of pit road, you'll notice that you've lost significantly less time in F1 than you would have in NASCAR. An F1 pit stop costs about 20 to 25 seconds, which means that often when the leader pits, he still comes out in the top 3. This is almost unheard of in NASCAR, where pit stops cost around 50 seconds. At most tracks, this means the leader will find himself in 20th place down a lap after pitting. This is because pit road is longer, 40 stalls instead of 10, and the average speed at a NASCAR race is higher, so you're missing out more when you're in the pits. Pitting under a safety car in F1 is somewhat of a free-for-all. As soon as the safety car comes out, drivers dash into the pits trying to get a stop done before their competitors catch up from behind. If it comes out just after you've passed the pit lane, you're out of luck because you can't pit once the field's bunched up, otherwise you'll lose all your track position. NASCAR has a simple and fair way around this. They just close pit road as soon as a caution comes out, and penalize anyone who makes a pit stop during this time. Then, once everyone's caught the pace car, NASCAR opens pit road and everyone can pit at the same time, ensuring that no one gets a random advantage based on where they were when the caution came out. Of course, this wouldn't work in F1 where teams share pit stalls. NASCAR has no official universal rule for track limits. At Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta, it's illegal to pass below the yellow line. This is to prevent an extra lane forming on the bottom. At all other ovals, you can drive below this line all you want. It's merely an indicator of where the banking stops. And at road courses, you can go off track as much as you like on corner exit, but on entry you can't blatantly cut the corner, otherwise you'll be told to stop and go. F1 gives drivers 3 warnings for crossing all 4 tires over the white lines on the edges of the track, and on the 4th strike starts applying time penalties. I still think this is a bit harsh, especially when you have a race like Austria in 2023, where there were 12 post-race track limits penalties that changed the entire finishing order. Once it starts to rain, both series will respond a little bit differently. F1 will leave the drivers out to fend for themselves and make a decision when they need to pit for intermediate or wet weather tires. This leads to some crazy moments where drivers are trying to hold onto their cars with slicks in the middle of a downpour. NASCAR is not confident enough yet to let the teams decide. They've only been racing in the rain for 5 years. When it starts raining, they'll throw a caution, then declare the track to be in a wet weather state, forcing everyone onto wet tires. They will let teams decide when to put slicks back on though. But if the rain is too hard, the race might have to stop. In F1 there could be a ton of spray thanks to how wide the tires are, and the low visibility makes it too dangerous to race sometimes, so they wait it out. NASCAR can occasionally have visibility problems, but they also just don't race in the rain at any ovals, although they might run in the damp on low-speed ovals like they did in New Hampshire in 2024. When trying to restart the race, the process is a lot more ironed out on NASCAR's end. They have a fleet of air titans and jet dryers ready to dry the track at all times, and they even run trucks around to break up the standing water. F1's delays can drag a little bit, and they don't really have any official track drying process. During the red flag, F1 allows teams to repair their cars and change tires as much as they like. Meanwhile, NASCAR has a strict no-service rule during these delays. They do still open pit road afterwards under caution though. On the one hand, I like teams being able to make repairs and return to the race during a delay, but on the other hand, it's definitely unfair to get a completely free pit stop if a red flag comes out. It might be interesting if both series modified their rules to allow repairs and ban service. If the race can't get restarted after a while, F1 will end it. There's a 3-hour time limit on all F1 races from their designated start time, or a 2-hour race limit, whichever comes first. If the race didn't finish 75% of the laps, less points will be awarded. NASCAR will postpone a race however long it takes, even several days, to finish at least half the laps or the first 2 stages, whichever comes first. Once they reach that point, if weather pops up and can't be dried by the end of the day, the race will be called early with full points awarded. I mentioned stages. NASCAR breaks up 35 of their 36 races into 3 stages. The first 2 stages are both about 25% of the laps each, and the final stage about 50%. At the end of each stage, the top 10 are awarded points. 10 for first down to 1 for 10th. NASCAR then throws a caution and the race is restarted. F1 has been able to avoid a lot of the gimmicks like this. Something you'll notice before stage 1 is even over is that NASCAR has commercials in the middle of the races. They're not just during the downtime under caution either. Fans will often be left in the dark with full screen commercial breaks while an intense pass for the lead or big crash happens at the track. Part of the appeal of F1 to me was that there isn't a single commercial during broadcasts, even in downtime under safety cars and red flags. The tension can really build during these times. When I started watching F1, I was confused by the drag reduction system, or DRS. It's used to assist drivers in passing by opening the rear wing to reduce drag. It can only be triggered on certain parts of certain straightaways, and you need to be within 1 second behind the car ahead. Without it, drivers would almost have to dive bomb for every position. In NASCAR, there's no push to pass, DRS, or anything like it. While we're on the topic of passing, dirty air is a massive problem in F1. Drivers can feel it even if they're 3 seconds behind the car ahead, and it makes passing hard, especially on tracks that have a lot of high-speed swooping lefts and rights like Suzuka. By the time cars reach the passing zone, they've fallen back too far in the dirty air to make a move. Dirty air is almost irrelevant at NASCAR road courses. In fact, in qualifying at Sonoma, Alex Bowman elected to closely follow Shane Van Gisbergen, the fastest road racer, to try to match his movements, and it actually worked decently well. Ovals are a different story though, and at some places like Dover and Phoenix, dirty air can make it extremely difficult to pass. One way to make passes in NASCAR is to use different grooves. Many tracks have what is called progressive banking, where the lanes closer to the wall are at a steeper angle, which allows for higher speed. At places like this, there's a trade-off. The top line provides a better run down the straightaway, but the bottom line is quicker through the corner, which makes for entertaining strategy games and bold moves like slide jobs. In F1, a driver might be able to back up his entry to get a better run out of the corner, but usually it's nowhere near as dramatic a difference as it can be in NASCAR. If there's an incident with only a few laps left in the race, NASCAR will add extra laps in order to have an overtime finish. They'll stay under caution until the incident is cleaned up, then declare 2 laps to go at the restart. Infinite attempts at overtime are allowed, but once the final lap is reached, the next flag, yellow or checkered, ends the race. F1 follows the traditional racing rule that NASCAR used to follow. The race will end under safety car if there's an incident. No overtime. Physical NASCAR flags at ovals are displayed solely by the flagman at the start-finish line. There are also lights around the track to distinguish green, yellow, and red flag conditions. In F1, marshals have posts all around the circuit where they display physical flags, plus there are digital indicators. Before the end of the race, NASCAR drivers will be displayed the white flag, indicating they've reached the final lap. F1 doesn't have a flag for the last lap, and a white flag instead indicates a slower vehicle ahead. Okay, so you won. In NASCAR, that locks you into the playoffs, the system used to crown the champion. It's 3 rounds of eliminating 4 drivers until there are 4 drivers left at the final race, and whoever finishes first wins the title. F1 has stuck to the full season points format. NASCAR still has points though, which can also be used to qualify for the playoffs or to make the next round. The race finish points award the winner 40 points, second place 35, third place 34, and so on down to 36 to 40th, each getting 1 point. F1's point system is a little harder to remember. First place gets 25, second gets 18, third gets 15, and the rest of the spots gradually wind down, with 10th place getting 1 point. This means that only the top 10 get points in F1, making each point more valuable. In F1, the first recorded stats after wins and titles are podiums. This is just a top 3, and all of the podium finishers celebrate on the steps after each race. NASCAR drivers don't celebrate podiums except on the rarest of occasions. They're more likely to keep track of stats like laps led, top 5s, top 10s, and even top 20s. Podiums would get awkward very fast in NASCAR because more often than not, the guy who finished second is devastated at not winning, and might even be mad at the guy who won for roughing him up on track. Once it's time to pack up and head to the next race, F1 has to account for a ton of travel time, so they don't race every week. They'll tend to do some swings where they race 3 weeks in a row in one continent, then have a couple weeks off, then race 2 in a row in another continent. It adds up to 24 races from March to November. NASCAR runs practically every week from the Daytona 500 in February to the championship race in November, with maybe an off week or 2 thrown in there somewhere. In the Constructors' Championship, F1 adds up the points scored by both drivers on each team to determine the winner. In NASCAR's equivalent of this, the Owners' Championship, points aren't added up or even averaged. Instead, it's decided by the car which makes it through the playoffs. In theory, this could be different from the driver who wins the championship if one car was shared by multiple good part-time drivers, but in practice, the owner's champion is always just the car that won the driver's championship, so no one really talks about it. It's weird to say given that F1 is infamous for being dominated, but over the years, there tends to be more movement among the top teams than in NASCAR. For the past 20 years of NASCAR, the top 2 teams have pretty much been Hendrick Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing in that order, with very few exceptions, while in F1 in that span, it's gone from Renault to Ferrari to Mercedes to Red Bull to McLaren, not to mention even Aston Martin making a run at having the fastest car a few years ago. So there's 50 differences between NASCAR and F1, trying to avoid the obvious stuff. I think there's definitely more to cover, but that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching, everyone.